white bread. And I wound up losing a lot of weight. I got sick. I had mono my freshman year.
And you were an athlete at this time.
Yes, and I was also trying to play a varsity sport. I was a tennis player back in college, not a golfer. I was a tennis player and carrying a full credit load, trying to play a varsity sport. And one of the friends on the tennis team said, if you work for the college food service, they'll give you a free meal. So I was like, great. So I started working for the college food service, fell in love with industrial cooking like that, and I would hang out in the kitchen a lot. I was on academic probation for the next almost 2 years because I was cutting all my classes and fell in love with cooking. And then I started working in a restaurant. And so my eventual career as a chef was born out of my own hunger and homelessness. And I made it through 4.5 years of college. All I had to do was student teach. And most kids in student teaching, they go home and live at home for the semester, and then you teach 6 weeks in a grammar school and 6 weeks in a high school and coach an after-school sport. Well, one, I didn't have a home to go home to. And two, I was working as a cook in a restaurant supporting myself, so what was I supposed to do? So I stood at the football field as my class graduated and cried. And I believed that I would get back there someday. But the restaurant I was working in, this was 1979, they offered me $128 a week, which was a lot of money back then. And so began my career in the kitchen. And then the next time I looked up, it was 25 years later, and I had forged a career as an executive chef. And during that time, had lots of different ministries regarding hospitality and food programming.
So what was your experience? You get out of college and you're working. What was your experience with faith or church or any of that during that time?
At that time, it was pretty non-existent. I was very angry with Christianity. I had started, down the road of drugs and alcohol, and, which are, I won't make an indictment per se of the restaurant industry, but it's very difficult because, when you're working those types of hours and you get out at 12, 1, 2 in the morning and the rest of the world is asleep, we would all go out to a club or to a bar and, partake in order to just relax. And so it's not an indictment of the whole industry, but there's a lot of addiction in the restaurant, in the hospitality industry. And so from a spirituality standpoint, there was very little. I never lost my faith. I used to have a little pocket New Testament with a lot of highlighter in it, little tiny pocket New Testament. So I never lost my faith completely, but I certainly didn't want to have anything to do with organized religion or Christianity. And then through my addiction and the degradation and the things I got involved in with that, when I did hit my bottom, I was living in Florida at the time. I contacted my mom, believe it or not, and asked if I could come and stay with her because I had to get out of Florida. I was being chased by one drug dealer in particular, and came up to New Jersey. Now, I'm 5'8", 5'8.5", and I weigh 125 pounds now. I was 105 pounds when I got off the plane, so I was completely emaciated, spent. I had literally spent my last $20 bill on cocaine, had been fired from my chef's job, was just involved in a lot of illegal and horrible activity. Came up to New Jersey. My mother helped me go cold turkey. She used to put me in hot showers all the time because I just felt like I was going to jump out of my skin, and she helped me through that time. And she did make me go up to the local Episcopal church and go to an AA meeting immediately, even that first night. And for me, AA is a great program. Narcotics Anonymous, great program. I went for about 2 weeks and decided that I needed to get right again with God, that was going to be the answer. That's the only framework I had. So I actually went back to the evangelical church that had been so abusive because that's all I knew. And I thought that's what I had to do to get my life back. I remember getting on my mother's bathroom floor and crying out to who I believed God was at that time and asking for forgiveness for ruining my life. And so I just marched myself right back into that environment again. But over the course of the next 13 years, got clean, got sober, completed a biblical studies program, thought I was called to the mission field. I was going to run a missionary guest house in Japan. And then through that time, I was working as a chef, and then I met a woman who, in the company, who eventually we became a couple. And that was 22 years ago, and we've been married a year. So thank you. And so through that time, I never completely lost my faith. It was always there. But I lost any sense of organized religion.
So how did the church respond? Or were you actively involved in church when you and Denise started seeing one another?
So I had been celibate for 10 years, active in my church, in charge of all the hospitality programming in that church, very, very active. When I realized that Denise and I became a couple, I wrote letters to my pastoral staff and our elder board explaining what had happened. And unless I repented of that sin and returned to the fold, I was not welcome.
They actually said to you, you aren't welcome here.
Correct. Unless I wanted to sit in the back row with the other unrepentant sinners or whatever. And, the unwed mothers and all the horrible folk in the back row. Unless I was willing to repent of my sin, there was really no, and was actually even told that my prayers would literally hit the ceiling of the room, and God would not hear my prayers as long as there was sin in my heart and in my life. So I said, okay, thank you, bye.
It had to have been such a loss as you were so involved. I mean, it's like losing a family in some sense, right? Like immediately.
Yes, and I just remember, I had gone through this biblical studies program and have always been into studying and theology, and I had a great library in my little apartment, and I wound up having 18 hefty garbage bags of books and papers and things regarding Christianity and my faith that I put out on the curbside. It was like the great divorce. Was very, very, very angry at organized religion, but again, never lost my faith. So Denise and I, we wound up moving to another part of Florida and had a wonderful life. And that whole time, I never lost my faith, but just had no interest in organized religion. And then as the years went by, kind of started heading into depression and a bit of a dark place, some frustration in life and career things, and longing for God, longing for community, thinking, well, there's no way. Our people, our kind, are not welcome. So after a particularly dark period of depression, I remember standing in my neighbor's yard at sunset, and this is in Naples, Florida, and looking at that gorgeous, it was an incredible orange and purple sky, and just crying out to God and saying, this is it. I'm done. You know I'm done. I know I'm done. And I was making arrangements to blow my brains out. I had called the waste management company. Denise was traveling for business, and I was going to have a dumpster delivered to the house the next day because I wanted to throw out all my books and my clothes and all semblance of Kim Grant on the face of this earth so that Denise didn't have to deal with it when they found me dead. And that night, there was from back in the day in the 80s, a contemporary Christian artist that I liked, and I just played this video of this song, Help Me God, over and over and over and over. I must have rewound it 100 times, I don't know. I made it through that night. And that morning, when I came out of the bedroom and walked across the living room, I just felt a little bit lighter. I just felt like I was standing a little taller. I felt a little lighter. And I got on my computer and I started Googling inclusive churches. And a church in Franklin, Tennessee popped up, Grace Point Church. And I thought, well, Franklin, Tennessee, I'm in Florida. I don't. but they had just done their inclusion statement, so there was a lot of media surrounding it. And so I went on their website and looked at some archived sermons, and I was like, And then I tuned into the live stream, and that first Sunday morning, Pastor Melissa Green was preaching. And she's become a dear friend and confidant, and someone who has led me to a place of wholeness and belovedness, and I'm forever grateful.
And she's going to be my next guest.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, she's been so instrumental in my journey to healing. So Melissa Green. Now, I had never, other than a televangelist, I had never heard a woman preach, and I tuned in live stream, and I was like, wow,
she can preach.
She's got some theological chops here. I was like, whoa. And they did communion, and I had not taken communion in, at that point, 19 years, because, I didn't want to take communion in an unworthy manner as long as there was unconfessed sin in my heart. So Melissa described about what it means to be welcome to the table. And so I grabbed a little thing of cranberry juice and a crust of bread, and I sat at my kitchen table with my computer, and I took communion with Melissa and Grace Point for the first time in 19 years and wept like a baby. And I knew from that moment on that I had found home, that I was finally home, that I had finally found a community of people where I could find healing.
So, just to, you're literally on the verge of suicide.
Yes.
You feel like it's just sort of that hopeless.
Yes.
And in the course of a day or so, you end up realizing that there actually is a space for you because a church, a group of people decided, hey, no, we're gonna do this.
Right. And there was an approach to Christianity, a progression of Christianity, of thought and belief that included the least of these. Well, goodness, didn't that sound like Christ? So it was overwhelming and inviting. And I asked Denise, my now spouse, I asked her, I said, look, I found this group of people. Do you want to tune in? And she was like, nope, you watch it, whatever. She knows how hurt I had been by the church, and she was like, I'm not having anything to do with that.
Did she have any background?
She grew up Catholic.
Okay, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, she grew up Catholic, but hadn't been actively involved for, her entire adult life. So finally I said, well, we go to Cape Cod for vacation most summers. And then I said, instead of going to Cape Cod, do you want to go to Tennessee? We could go to Nashville. We could go see if this church is all they're cracked up to be. And she resoundingly said, church vacation? What are you kidding me? Church vacation? And I was like, well, oh yeah. So we came up and we were here for a week, and we knew that we had found I won't say an ideology. We found a community, and we found a new way of approaching God and Christianity that was completely refreshing, and what I believed to be the authentic faith that I think Christ really meant for all of us. So,
can I ask, what was that like? Being there that Sunday, and
well, everything was blurry because it was through a lot of tears. For me, the journey was life-changing, life-giving. I just could not believe that I was in the midst of this. And in the meantime, the months ensuing from when I first tuned into the live stream and heard Melissa preach to us coming up on vacation was quite a few months. So I had listened to a lot of the archived sermons and really started the deconstruction of an old faith, an old theology that was harmful, and began the journey to reframing my Christian faith. So that week was incredible. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, afternoon coffee. The community of people wanted to just spend time with us. And midweek, we're back in the hotel room. And remember, Denise, Miss Church Vacation, said to me, do you sense that maybe we're supposed to relocate here? And I was like, what?
So
Are you kidding me?
She goes from church vacation to, hey, maybe we should move.
Yeah. And we owned a home in Florida. We had, we had our lives there. And I was like, well,